Patriarch Kirill is in a panic. There could have been a terrorist attack on Putin, and the security service let it all slip through. How did one child cause panic throughout the entire Kremlin? I'll tell you the details now. Hello everyone, my name is Anastasia Husaryova. While you're liking this video and subscribing to our channel, I'll tell you all the details so you don't miss anything and stay informed. So let's get started. In Moscow, during the celebrations for National Unity Day, an unexpected incident occurred. A girl asked Putin a question about her uncle, who was at the front and had been wounded. Her simple, childlike request instantly sparked a scandal in the Kremlin and on social media.
I would like him to be transferred to an appropriate and good hospital. Let's find one.
Him, okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for truly remembering him.
A good hospital in Russia? That was exactly the girl's request. To understand the significance of the incident, it's important to know on which day it happened. Every year, on November 4th, Russia celebrates National Unity Day. The history of this day dates back to the early 17th century, when Moscow merchants and ordinary citizens, led by Kuzma Minin and Prince Dmitry Pozharsky, organized a militia against the Polish invaders. This holiday carries a strong symbolic meaning. In modern Russia, it is used as an opportunity to demonstrate national unity and support for the state authorities. And the monument to Minin and Pozharsky in Moscow, which you can see now, has become one of the main symbols of this holiday. And the president's participation in the laying of flowers always emphasizes its importance for the official ideology. During these ceremonies, Putin laid flowers at this very monument, surrounded by cameras, security officials, and Patriarch Kirill of Moscow. Yes, that's the very same individual who, as you may recall, actively and publicly supported Russia's military attack on Ukraine.
Addresses all the servicemen. Christ is risen, and together with him we shall all rise. And life is eternal. Therefore, go forth bravely and with unwavering courage to faithfully fulfill your important military duty. And remember, if you lay down your life for your beloved homeland, for your friends, as the Holy Scripture says, you will be with God in his beautiful and peaceful garden, in his kingdom, in his glory, in his eternal life.
Probably for those believers who are truly faithful, their hair stands on end. But let's move on. That day, everything was as usual. Strict, solemn, according to the script. And suddenly, a girl from Novosibirsk, whom we've already talked about, was brought to the president. Her name is Kira. She addressed him not with fear, but with childlike sincerity. She said that her uncle is fighting, was wounded in the arm, but instead of being treated, he was sent back to the front. She asked to have him transferred to a good hospital in Russia.
He was wounded in the arm. He was in the hospital. He isn't being treated at all. Now they're sending him on a mission. I would like him to be transferred to a good hospital in Russia. We will find one. All right? Anton Fissura. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for remembering him.
Let's move on now regarding what the girl said. My uncle, who is currently fighting, wants to be transferred to a good hospital. It's simple. No politics, no slogans, just a child's request. Help! Putin, who did not expect such a question, was forced to respond in front of the cameras. He thanked her, said he would find this man, and of course would help. He even praised Kira, saying it was good that she remembered her relative. For the average viewer, this might seem like a simple, humane story. But for the Kremlin and the president's inner circle, it became a serious incident. A child's question, which seemed innocent, exposed what millions remain silent about: the authorities' indifference to their own soldiers. Just a few hours after this moment, a scandal began. Not because of the wounded soldier, not because of the army's inaction, but because this girl was able to approach Putin at all. According to reports from Russian telegram channels, Patriarch Kirill was outraged. He did not like that an unknown child was allowed near them. I quote a source close to the church. Our primate is outraged. The security allowed an unknown child to approach the president and the patriarch. What if it had been a bomb or an assassination attempt? That's exactly what he said, a bomb. Just imagine a clergyman who should be speaking about mercy, about love, about faith, is afraid of a child. Now, every frame where Moscow Patriarch Kirill talks about faith, about strength, about spirituality, looks like a farce. And every speech by Putin about the courage of soldiers sounds hollow. Because one little girl reminded him that courage is not about sitting at a long table, but about having the heart to speak the truth. And this is where things get most interesting. Because this incident is not just a minor episode, it's a symbol of how deeply they live in fear. The current Russian authorities, they are afraid of their own people. They are afraid of the truth. They are even afraid of children. And so when a child asks a question, it's like a mirror in which the entire Kremlin sees itself, forcing the authorities not just to blush, but to tremble, to become aware of their own lies and fear. And in this sense, a child becomes more important than any protest or demonstration. Why aren't the wounded being treated? The little girl asks. And translated into adult language, this means, why are you lying that everything is fine? Why are you sending people to their deaths? And here is the reaction. Instead of saying, well done, girl, for caring, high-ranking officials start looking for someone to blame. Who let her get close? Where was the security? What if it was a provocation? Even the security service is forced to make excuses. Everything was under control. Even a child's question for them is under control. Under control. It's also interesting that after this incident, many Russians on social media started discussing not the girl's words, but actually the behavior of the security. As if the main threat isn't the war, not corruption, not the indifference of the system, but little Kira, who dared to ask about her uncle. If you dig even deeper, this story reveals another important thing. Putin tries to show that everything is under control, that the people support him, that he is the father of the nation. But then a little girl appears, and in just a few seconds, this image falls apart. Because people see not a leader, but an ordinary official who doesn't know how to answer a child, because every word he says sounds fake. And most importantly, this story shows that even children already see the lies. They see that the heroic stories about the front don't match what's really happening. They see that soldiers aren't being treated, that they're being thrown back into hell because the system doesn't see them as people. And here you can see the very essence of the Russian regime. Where a normal state would see an opportunity to help, Russians see a conspiracy. Where a person shows compassion, Russians see a threat. Where a child simply asks for justice, Russians see a potential terrorist attack. This is a country where honesty is dangerous. Where even children can fall under suspicion if they say something wrong. For example, we can mention the arrest of the street singer, 18-year-old Diana Loginova, who a month ago was singing songs in the center of St. Petersburg that the Russian authorities had added to the list of banned materials as extremist content. The girl, together with her band Stop Time, performed Monetoshka's song called You're a Soldier and I'm a Poet, which isn't even officially available for listening yet, as well as Noise MC's song Cooperative Libidinous Lakes. In particular, the ballet Libidinous Lakes was traditionally associated with the collapse of the USSR, when it was broadcast on television against the backdrop of social and political chaos, becoming a symbol of the Union's downfall. Currently, Russian youth perceive the song's lyrics as a metaphor for the collapse of Putin's regime. And here it should be added that the very next day, the police detained Diana and took her to one of the police stations in St. Petersburg, leaving her there for the entire night. Several groups of law enforcement officers were on duty near the station. Apparently, the 18-year-old street singer was scarier than any super criminal since she was guarded like that by such a huge number of law enforcement officers. Later, according to Russian sources, it became known that she was sentenced to 13 days of arrest. After the young singer's arrest, a wave of support began in Russia. Rallies in her defense took place in various cities, including Moscow and Novosibirsk. There were solo pickets, and in St. Petersburg, posters appeared demanding the release of the band's members. In Perm, a solidarity concert was held, and in Saratov, street musicians played a song by the Russian singer Monetokka. Moreover, Monetochka herself supported the arrested street musicians by reciting a poem during her performance in Valencia, Spain.
You make an evil face, but you're actually afraid of guitars and singers. You're scared of ink, canvases, watercolors, and love, of anyone who's even a little bit brave. You're afraid of so many things that it's actually easier for me to say what you're not afraid of. You're afraid of poetry, you're afraid of love, of funeral flowers, of your own reflection, of kisses in the subway shamelessly on display, of smiling mouths and wide open eyes. You're equally terrified of me and of Carrier, and you bare your teeth in fear. You're afraid of golden, girlish curls, of the shimmering voices of the young. You're afraid of our burning hearts because they melt the lead in steel. And like birds, our songs fly to those who are kind, who are brave, and who are honest.
This case shows that even a single act or a child's question, as in Kira's case, can potentially spark a wave of civic response. From mass rallies and protests by the relatives of those on the front lines to individual acts of solidarity, or it might not spark anything at all. It all depends on how a society that has lived under fear and propaganda for so long will respond to a simple, honest truth. But let's get back to the girl Kira. The video of the conversation was published by journalist Pavlo Zarubin, a Kremlin journalist, but soon the segment with Kira's request disappeared from the video. Of course, the official Russian media are trying to pretend that nothing happened. They presented it as a touching moment when the president spoke with a child. Not a word about the scandal, not a word about Patriarch Kirill's reaction, but the internet remembers everything. The recording has already been seen by thousands of users on Twitter and Telegram. Even the international publication The Sun has already published a detailed account of this story. They noted in their article that the girl lost her father just last year. He died in the very war that Russian propaganda cynically calls a special military operation. He was mobilized in the fall of 2022, and a year and a half later, he was killed near Holivka in Donetsk region. Another one of her uncles is also at war. In this family, war has become a part of everyday life. It took away her father, cripples her uncles, and leaves the child without support. And you could say, yes, this is a terrible story, this is grief, this is pain. Every child wants to live in peace. But there is a harsh truth here that cannot be silenced, because her father did not die defending his own home. He died trying to seize ours. He was not standing on his own land, he stepped onto someone else's. He came here with weapons, carrying out criminal orders, and now in Russia he is called a hero. Only because he served the regime. Yes, for little Russian Kira, that was her dad. For us, he is just another occupier. And this is a terrible but necessary truth. Even in these so-called family tragedies lies the evil that Russia itself has created. Now, her uncles are continuing the same thing. One of them, wounded but thrown back to the front line again, because in the Russian system, people are expendable. The other perhaps doesn't even realize yet that he's not fighting for his homeland, but for the imperial ambitions of a dictator. And the girl, without realizing it, asks for help from those who themselves are helping to destroy other people's lives. And while children in Ukraine are hiding from rockets, children in Russia are thanking those who are launching those rockets. And that's the whole point. The war took Kira's father from her, but she never understood what he died for, because no one told her the truth. Her father came to kill, not to protect. Little Russian girl Kira may not have even realized how her brief conversation with Putin suddenly put the Kremlin in an awkward position. But sometimes it's the simplest words, thank you, that become the most powerful weapon. Not bombs, not missiles, but human words. And now, perhaps for the first time in a long while, they made the Kremlin tremble, not from fear of the West, but from their own children. So no matter how much they try to hide it, the truth has already come to light. And when there are many such questions, then no amount of security, no patriarchs, and no propagandists will be able to help. Because fear of a child is no longer strength. It's a sentence. So write in the comments how much longer you think the Putin regime has left. We will definitely read them. Don't forget to like and support us by subscribing. That's also very important. And we'll see you in the next broadcasts. My name is Anastasia Husaryova. Take care of yourselves and wash your hands with soap. Bye-bye, everyone. Putin has disappeared. No one knows where he is. No one knows where his motorcade went or what to do about all of this. Hello, my name is Anastasia Husaryova, and while you subscribe to our channel, like, and leave comments, I'll tell you the details. Of course, Putin hasn't disappeared entirely, as we all might wish, but rather has vanished from reality. Investigative journalists have managed to uncover large-scale concealment of Putin's actual movements. Moreover, they found out how many offices he has, how he moves around, and whom and how he tries to deceive. And most importantly, what Putin is afraid of. Now, I'll tell you all the details, and from you, as I already mentioned, I'll be expecting likes and your support. So, Putin, the Russian dictator, governs Russia not from a single office, but from at least 3 absolutely identical rooms. They are located in different regions of Russia, as confirmed by American and Ukrainian investigative journalists who discovered exact duplications of the interiors and unnatural simultaneous appearances of officials in different places. For example, this was reported by the BBC. They refer to data from the investigative project Systema, and now I'll tell you what they managed to find out. Each of the offices is an exact replica of another. The placement of pens and pencils on the desk with the double-headed eagle, the choice of furniture, the lighting, and even the order of books on the shelves. The windowless rooms create the illusion of Putin's presence in any corner of the country and make it impossible to guess his true and actual location. Here, for example, in this picture, you can see that with the arrows, journalists, after analyzing various videos, pointed out inconsistencies that do not match up and allow the conclusion that these are different offices, but ones that were made to look very much like the same office. So in order to confuse even those closest to him, the Kremlin sometimes sends out empty motorcades and decoy planes, as if the president is really traveling from one place to another, while in reality, the real Putin is sitting in one of these 3 bunkers connected via encrypted communication, issuing orders to the military and managing domestic policy. The computers in the offices are completely disconnected from the internet, and this informational cocoon allows the dictator to control the flow of information around him and make decisions in total isolation. And of course, things aren't so simple when it comes to Putin's appearances on television. It turned out that some of his appearances are actually pre-recorded events that the Kremlin presents as live. Such videos are referred to as canned goods in the media environment. They are released on days when the president does not actually appear in public, while the officials who participated in the recordings attend other events on the same day to conceal this deception. They are instructed to dress exactly as they did on the day of the meeting with Putin. So, during the recording of this canned footage, they try to recreate the same look, but it's not always possible to replicate it perfectly. Journalists have noticed numerous details that give away these very canned segments. For example, in one of these recordings, the head of the Agency for Strategic Initiatives, Bulavka, appears. In a black jacket with gold buttons, but at actual events on the same day, she was wearing different accessories. The same applied to other high-ranking officials and to Putin himself. The shifting positions of pens and books on the table revealed that the video had been recorded much earlier. Another confirmation of the use of pre-recorded content is the removal of metadata from photos and videos, which previously allowed the exact date and time of filming to be determined. Now the Kremlin is trying to erase traces and create the illusion of Putin's constant activity, even when he is not physically present in public. In this way, the Russian dictator can maintain absolute secrecy about his whereabouts, control the agenda, and govern the country without showing himself in real time, creating a sense of constant presence and total control. It's not just offices that help Putin remain invisible to the world. The Kremlin also actively uses empty motorcades and deceptive movements to confuse even its own officials. When the president is supposedly traveling to another location, in reality, the motorcade sets off completely empty. But for officials and all those who are close to the Kremlin, it signals that the president is there. And when the president supposedly boards a plane, a decoy plane takes off, in other words, without Putin on board. And this allows the real Putin not only to conceal his movements, but also to maintain control over the country, when information about him is the most valuable resource. And while Putin is hiding even from his own officials and his staff, that tries to arrange the books, pencils, and papers in cups in an absolutely identical order, while journalists and investigators notice all of this and inform us about it. In reality, a real threat is growing right under Putin's nose, and it seems that so far he hasn't noticed it. Specifically, inside the Kremlin, the situation is becoming increasingly tense, and discontent is growing within elite circles. The number of people dissatisfied with Putin's actions and advocating for an end to hostilities without any kind of victory is increasing. A high-ranking source told journalists that while Ukrainian troops are heroically fighting at the front, there are those in the Kremlin who are irritated by the war and the crisis. They are especially outraged by the new harsh internet restrictions being prepared for next year. And he called such people weak and traitors. According to him, the internal enemies are currently lying low, but they could reveal themselves at any moment and might even attempt an attack on the president. That is why an immediate response is needed. Other sources, however, clarified that the situation is not that critical. But they confirmed that the number of supporters for a quick end to the hostilities within the Kremlin is indeed growing. Panic and suspicion now reign in Kremlin circles. Everyone suspects each other. After Putin gave the order to consider the possibility of returning to nuclear testing, the atmosphere within the Russian authorities became even more explosive. According to sources close to Putin's administration, the very emergence of the nuclear issue has frightened many Russian officials and influential business groups. The number of those in the Kremlin who want to end the war as soon as possible has long been growing against Ukraine without any victorious statements or triumphs. But now, as Putin demonstrates his willingness to raise the stakes, the number of such people may increase. Within the dictator's administration, this is perceived as a serious threat. Some members of Putin's inner circle believe that weakened and frightened representatives of the elite may begin to put pressure on the president to stop the escalation. It is precisely these people who are now being called internal enemies. Previously, such figures were treated with caution because they had money, influence, and often held key positions. But now it is said that the approach has changed. Sources describe the upcoming steps as tough, and in some offices, they openly talk about preparing for a large-scale purge of those who do not support nuclear blackmail and endless war. A second Kremlin source confirms the threat that part of the elite might oppose escalation is real. And although it is still unclear exactly how those dissenters might be punished, everyone inside already understands that a new stage of fear and mutual suspicion is beginning at the top of the government. This feeling also explains why Putin appears in public less and less often, and why security around him is being tightened. The Kremlin admits that the danger may come not only from outside, but also from people who are formally considered part of the very same system. Putin's absence from public view and his rare appearances at video conferences may be connected not only to internal conflicts within the Kremlin, but also to the escalation of nuclear rhetoric in the world itself. According to the latest data, against the backdrop of tests of Russian strategic weapons, the Burevestnik missile and the Poseidon underwater drone, both capable of carrying nuclear warheads, U.S. President Donald Trump was quick to respond. The Americans announced their intention to resume their own nuclear tests. Moreover, information has already emerged that such tests were conducted in August. This became the first such move among nations in the 21st century after North Korea. Against the backdrop of these events, the Kremlin cautiously claims that the Russian tests of Burevestnik and Poseidon are not full-fledged nuclear tests, but of course, in their usual manner, they add that if other countries violate this moratorium, then Russia will respond according to the situation. Such an intensification of nuclear rhetoric is effectively bringing the world to a new stage of escalation. Although, formally, the testing of missiles and underwater drones does not violate the ban on underground nuclear explosions. They increase tensions and prompt corresponding actions from other nuclear states. Well, and here Russia and the United States of America have a certain history, a history of restrictions on nuclear testing from the 1963 treaty banning tests in the atmosphere underwater and in outer space, to the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, which imposes limits on the number of deployed warheads and their delivery systems. However, in recent years, control mechanisms have gradually weakened and some agreements have completely lost their force. But let's get back to Putin, to his hiding and to his fears. What he fears most is for his own life, that he will either be killed or poisoned. That's why, over the years, a vast network of underground shelters stretching for thousands of kilometers has been built around him. Some of these facilities have been exposed by journalistic investigations, others by data from Western intelligence agencies. And some information was accidentally leaked by Russian contractors themselves. And the overall picture here is simple. Putin is preparing to wait it out, even in the event of a nuclear war. The existence of a large underground complex beneath the Kremlin became known decades ago. According to estimates, it may be about 200 meters deep. This is the level of shelter capable of withstanding a powerful nuclear explosion. It is here, according to Russian plans, that the top leadership is supposed to hide if the big button, the red button, meaning the nuclear one, is actually pressed. The second most well-known bunker is the one beneath the palace near Gelendzhik. Its existence was confirmed even by technical blueprints, which for years were publicly available on the contractor's website. According to this information, the bunker has a network of tunnels, an elevator that descends about 50 meters underground, ventilation systems, a water supply, and cables for autonomous operation. And this structure looks like an autonomous command post, where you can wait things out for weeks. Under the residence, but this time in Novo Ogaryovo, there is allegedly a separate complex with enhanced biological security. According to people familiar with the residence's infrastructure, air and water filtration systems have been installed there that can protect even against chemical or biological attacks. A separate topic is the Urals and the residence located there. The city of Mezhgorye, almost like Yanukovych's Mezhihiria, is closed and completely controlled by the military surrounding Mount Yamantau. It is there that a gigantic secret complex has been under construction for decades. Satellite images have been recording large-scale construction there since the 1990s, but Russia has never explained what they are building. After the start of the full-scale war, construction intensified and access to the area is now almost completely closed. There is a flight ban over the territory. The infrastructure inside continues to expand. This particular bunker has been called the place where Putin hides out during the most dangerous moments. There is also information about other shelters. For example, Kosvinsky Kamen, which is in Sverdlovsk Oblast. The Grot complex, which was originally built for communications and data analysis, but was later converted into a possible bunker. Altai, beneath the sanatorium of the estate, locals have repeatedly seen presidential helicopters in the area, and the infrastructure itself shows signs of being a strategic-level underground shelter. There are also smaller bunkers, warehouses, and backup shelters stocked with fuel, food, oxygen, and communication equipment. They are scattered all across Russia. And here it should be added that Ukrainian drones have already attacked Sochi precisely at times when the Russian dictator was there. And this is not speculation, but information that has been reported by Russian media themselves. Thank you. They will no longer be able to hide it. For years, the dictator avoided Sochi, even though one of his main residences, Bocharov Ruchi, is located there. By the way, this photo was taken precisely at that residence. It's where Putin received the organizers and participants of the Olympics, which was taking place in Sochi at the time. And it was in this very residence that he received them. So, Bocharov Ruchi. After 2022, he rarely went there and only for short periods, fearing that Ukrainian drones might reach the coast. But this year, everything has changed. Putin started appearing in the city again, and that's exactly when Ukrainian drones arrived there. The first attack took place on the night of September 9th. Sirens in Sochi went off 3 times. The airport was closed for half an hour. Debris from a downed drone killed a man and damaged private homes. At that moment, it is highly likely that Putin was in Sochi. The day before, he had joined the BRICS summit from there, and the presidential plane, the same one he used to fly to Alaska to meet with Trump, landed in Sochi a few hours before the attack. And he stayed there. Russian journalists remind us that after the start of the full-scale war, Putin practically stopped visiting Sochi because he was afraid that Ukrainian drones would find him there. In 2024, he even spent the night on a plane to avoid the risk of a strike on the residence. The second attack took place on October 2nd, literally just minutes after Putin finished his speech at the Valdai Club meeting. Thank you. Ukrainian drones struck Sochi and neighboring Syria late in the evening, and the airports were closed at 10:30 p.m. Local residents heard explosions and air defense activity over the Black Sea. Flight restrictions lasted for 7 hours. The Moscow Times directly reported that Putin was in Sochi at the time of the attack. For Putin, this has become a kind of new reality. Neither his residences nor secret routes can save him anymore, nor the tuples of deception. And each time the drones fly closer and closer to him. That is why in recent months the dictator has rarely risked staying in Sochi overnight, and his movements are accompanied by maximum secrecy. It all looks as if he is truly being deliberately hunted, and he understands this perfectly well. That's why there are those meter-long tables. And the quarantine that everyone who planned to meet with Putin had to go through, and his bathing in baths made from deer antlers, and those people who follow him with suitcases and clean up all his excrement, he never, notice, drinks water in public unless it is the one provided by his security or defense service. And of course, one could say that the dictator is definitely starting to become paranoid. Well, and we believe in the fact that sooner or later Ukrainian drones will find him, but here we should also add something. Hardly any dictator has ended, almost none has ended their life peacefully, quietly, in their own bed. Remember how Stalin ended. Look up and read how Hitler ended, how Mussolini ended his life. If we take modern history, then let's recall what happened to Gaddafi. When we really hope that Putin still remembers these lessons of real, not invented history? Well, we'll be watching to see where this paranoia leads and whether another rebellion will break out inside the Kremlin. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next broadcasts. My name is Anastasia Husaryova. Take care of yourselves and wash your hands with soap.